Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Anna Hansen, and I am the sales director here at ByteSpeed. And I'm very excited to introduce Brian and Steve to you. They are our resident Lenovo and Microsoft experts, and they're going to walk us through what we need to know about Windows 11 and the upcoming changes to licensing so that we can be successful. So, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get those answered as we go through. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Brian.
Great. Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Brian Vitalico. I am the Director of Partner Development here at Microsoft, and I sit within the Device Partner Solutions and Sales organization. So that means I spend a lot of my time really thinking about Windows devices. I think a lot about, the interaction in the modern workspace as a whole. And so I'm excited to talk to you guys through just some updates in general about where we're going in terms of AI, where we're going in terms of the Windows platform, how that connects into Copilot and M365. So, please, if you have questions as we go through, plop them into the chat. I'm happy to address them as we get toward the end here. In general, sorry, here, let me advance this along. We'll talk mostly about the Windows platform. The Lenovo team, Steve Heyman will jump on, talk a little bit about where Lenovo's headed. I'm sure the ByteSpeed team will also talk about, in general, where they can support you as a whole. So let's just kind of get into it. And this is the theme, right? I think we're hearing so much about AI, and it's coming at you all fast and furious. You read news articles every day, or you look at the stock market, and Microsoft's up, Nvidia's up, and everyone's saying, wow, it's all about AI. And then you ask the question, well, what does it actually mean? And there's about 1,000 different answers, right? And there's 1,000 different directions that it can go. And so what I'm hoping to do is just put it all into a little bit more context for you to understand just about how it can be a little bit more real and a little bit more tangible. So it does start with this, reality that AI is shifting business today. I mean, you would be probably, have been hiding somewhere if you hadn't just heard the term, you hadn't seen its impact. And I'm sure many of you already are seeing its impact on your business, whether that be end users already using different types of technologies, whether that be you've already deployed AI tools, or at least you're starting to think about what AI could mean for your business. And it's very significant. We are seeing its impact, and I'm going to share some early results with you about Microsoft's perspective on this. But we are absolutely seeing an impact all the way down to the individual level, at the divisional level, organizational level, and industry level of where and how AI is starting to just shift the way we're speaking. And if nothing else, right, even if it's not deployed in your business yet, you're at least starting to think about and getting creative about what it could mean to you 18 months down the road, 24 months down the road. And that conversation alone is changing the way you're starting to frame and think about your business. And so even if you aren't seeing the tangible effects or impacts quite yet, you're probably starting to at least think about what it could mean to you as we get further and further down this journey. And so we have to live in that reality. This reality is that it is here, it is going to have a change. And so how do we address it? So I want to share, first, what are some of the reasons why we're talking so much about AI? Why are we seeing budgets from, IT departments shift toward AI expenditures? And the reality is that there's a demand for it. And I'll talk to specifically where we see that. And all of the stats I'm about to share come from the Work Trend Index. This is a survey that we do, I believe, twice a year in the market to about 30,000, 40,000 or so individuals, really just to get a pulse on what's going on at the individual level. How are different technologies impacting their work? We started this survey during COVID, where we started to learn a lot more about how remote work and hybrid work was impacting, worker productivity. And it's continued to evolve and transition as new technologies and new trends have come out. So if you haven't looked at this before, it's incredibly insightful. If you're a business leader, this is incredibly insightful, or an IT manager. This is a survey that you guys all have access to, and you can get a sense of, what's going on by vertical and by industry to get, better information about how end users are navigating, a current trend. And obviously the trend today is really focused on AI. So the first one is, again, in the effort of trying to answer the question of, well, what's going on? Why is AI becoming so prevalent? This is the first place that we've come to. We're all being asked to do so much more with less. Even at Microsoft, we've had opportunities to take on stretch assignments, and that's a really nice way of saying, we're being asked to thin organizations and become more effective and more efficient. And what does that actually produce? Well, it's produced this reality that we're struggling to keep up with the pace and the volume of work with the tools that we used to have, right? Uh, when you have so many different things put on your shoulders, so many emails to answer, so many invites, in Outlook to address, you start to get that overall overwhelming feeling, right? And so what it's left to is that nearly half of our employees feel burnt out, right? Everyone is struggling with just this overall pace. And so this is where technology has that opportunity to either create a bigger problem or to start to address that. And Copilot, and what I'll show you, I think is really going to be doing an amazing job to address this feeling of how do we actually keep up? How do we figure out how to be more effective and better users of our own time? So the next thing that we kind of look at is the reality that this is what end users are driving toward, right? We are seeing that AI is already in place. Many organizations may not even be aware that their employees and end users are using AI tools that are kind of freewheeling out in the market. And we've kind of referenced this as the BYO AI approach. And so things like ChatGPT, as an example, employees using ChatGPT to create content or draft memos or draft emails. Nearly, three-quarters of employees are already using tools like that, or they're using unlicensed tools, that are just out there in the internet to create video content or things like that, right? This definitely exists. And so that's not a position that we as business owners or as IT managers or business decision makers really want to see. We don't necessarily want that uncontrolled, call it shadow IT approach, where perhaps sensitive information or business information is being shared kind of freewheeling in the market. And so the realities are that we have to address the fact that there is that burnout and employees are already using this. How do we start to coming together in the middle to support the technology needs of our end users and get after this kind of shadow environment before it becomes too much of a problem? And there is this kind of reality that employee usage is high, as I just showed you, but that leadership doesn't feel like we're keeping up, right? 80%, of leaders believe AI is an imperative. They know they have to do it. So we're not at that position of needing to convince, business users out there that this is an important aspect. That's kind of come and gone. But a vast majority don't really have a plan for it. And so this is where I think all of us here, have an obligation to you all to help you develop that plan, to start thinking about how do we address, AI in your environment. You have to know it's already being used. So how do we make sure that we're doing it in the right way? How do we make sure that you get the right return on it? And how do we make sure we do it in a secure and manageable way so that your, sensitive business information isn't just out there in the market? So when we think about, AI as a whole, again, trying to add some additional context here, because there's AI is just such a blanket term. What are we really going to see? So I would say over the next 18, 24, 36 months, the focus is going to be very much around productivity gains. And so think of this as the Microsoft Copilot for M365 story. And if you haven't seen that, I won't talk much about that today, but there's a ton of videos. I'm sure we can share links on the impact of Copilot, but that is all about an inward looking view, right? How do you make end users in your organization more productive, right? How do you give them more time in the day? And, by a lot of different, departments, whether that be sales or finance and HR, there's a lot of use cases for how to use AI tool sets productively to just improve that experience at the end user level. That over time will transition, and this is where the creativity will start to come in, and this is where it starts to get interesting, is as organizations start to ingest, something like Microsoft Copilot and ingest those productivity tools, they begin to then start seeing, well, how can I take AI and incorporate it into products? How do we become an AI, selling organization? And so as you think about your business, and I'll just, use a random example here. Let's just say one of you out there is managing a handful of medical offices or dentist offices or something like that, right? Right now, that inward focus could be, helping your front desk with schedules using Copilot or helping respond to patients with Copilot, things like that. But over time, right, that could ultimately transition into, well, how do you take that experience and make it more customer facing by creating, a chat bot on your website to schedule appointments. And so things like that, I think, is where, again, we're going to start to transition. As people become more productive, they're going to find that use case of AI. So it's going to get really interesting here. And this is where, the Microsoft tool set comes in to really allow that platform approach to allow you as customers to build on top of it whatever you feel is the need for your business. So when Microsoft looks at the market, these are kind of the categories of areas, if you will, that we think about when it comes to that AI transformation. Microsoft Copilot, that is our end user productivity toolset stack. That is let's call it the software applications, for lack of a better way to describe it, that we've created that we think best suits the market productivity gaps and addresses them head on, right? So this is things like the experience within PowerPoint or using Teams and having the Copilot chat icon within that, or Copilot within Windows, which I'll talk a bit about. The Copilot stack then gets into more of the infrastructure views, right? This is about how do we open up those APIs? How do we allow access to application developers or ISVs or yourselves access into the Microsoft infrastructure so that you can build your own AI applications, your own copilots, leveraging the large language models or the small language models that we have installed, and have partnerships with. And then the last is the Copilot Plus PC, which I will talk a bit about. And that is, how do we match up where end users engage with the technology with all of this great infrastructure, with the right types of devices to be able to run your business or leverage AI in the way that suits your business best, and what are we doing to invest in that platform? And I'll talk about that here in a moment as well. So let's talk about results, because I think this is where it gets interesting, for all of you. And so when we looked at our early adopters of Copilot for M365, really what we've seen is a significant return of time back to the organization. And that's the one stat I think from all of this that I want you to kind of see and take away, which is 10 hours a month. And so for a small business or a medium-sized business, just doing some basic math, what does 10 additional hours per employee mean to you as an organization? What does it mean to them as an individual? And we actually do see, specific impacts from this. We see a 4% uplift in revenue. We see nearly a point reduction in operational expenditures. And this is the one that I find really compelling. And that is going to that very first stat that I talked about, that 51% of organizations that have deployed Copilot are already citing that employee well-being is one of their top outcomes. It's removing that burden of being buried in work, being inundated by work all the time, and really starting to, expose end users to how it can be improved. Personally, for me, I've absolutely seen this. I use Copilot every day. A couple of examples for me is I have not taken notes in a meeting in a year now. And for me, it was an area of stress, it was an area of weakness. And so when I looked at how I could use Copilot to best address what I needed personally in my day-to-day work, that is the one that I've gravitated towards. So I record just about every single one of my meetings. I allow Copilot to recap those meetings, to capture action items, solicit that action item back to me. I can share that with the group that was attending the meeting, and it's just turned me into a much more productive employee, and frankly allowed me to foster better relationships with people during the meetings. I'm not sitting here focused on capturing every detail. I'm really able to stay engaged and stay focused on the conversation, participating in the conversation. So not only am I more productive and less stressed, but I'm also just more effective and more creative when I'm actually having the discussions. So it has really been tremendous for me to see this, and having conversations with those organizations that have deployed Copilot into their environment. We're seeing a lot of similar things, and everyone's kind of got their one or two things that really stood out to them. And I'm excited, obviously, for this to continue. So we'll learn more and more about the impact that it's going to have. So that's the setup when we think about AI and the impact that it's going to have on the market and where we're headed, and how Copilot, as an example, very focused again on end user experience, what it could actually have. But now I want to pivot to what could go wrong, right? And I think it would be naive of us to say, oh, yeah, this is great. Just, let's just buy it and let's deploy it. And you guys are great. You're going to see 10 hours right off the bat, and all your employees are going to give you high fives, and this is going to be fantastic for you. And the reality is that could be true, but there are certainly things to consider around how do we help to make sure that you get the most out of it. And so I equate Copilot for M365 as a rocket engine, right? It really has the opportunity to accelerate your business, has the opportunity to launch you into whatever direction you're looking to go as a business owner, right? The problem is if you put that rocket ship on, let's say, a moped, and you put that moped on a bumpy dirt road, the experience at the end of the road, you're going to look a little frazzled, right? You're going to have maybe not the experience you're looking for, and equate that to that 10 hours of time that you're trying to get back. It's going to be tough to get all 10 hours back if you're bouncing around down the road and the moped is falling apart. And so you have to start considering things kind of in the forefront. What are the things that you could do as an organization to start optimizing and getting the most out of that Copilot and AI experience that you are ultimately driving toward? And so this is just an example of a readiness checklist. It's certainly not exhaustive, but things that most organizations should consider before or as they're considering deploying any AI solution. Copilot being the Microsoft version, but I would just say, anything, whether you're a graphics design firm and you're about to deploy Adobe or anything like that, right? What are you doing to optimize the experience in the best possible way? For me, and what we're going to mostly focus on today is how do modern devices and the way in which you manage and deploy those really fit into this picture? How are you providing a platform view that allows AI to sit on top of it and really optimize the experience? But there's far more than just devices. You're considering things like security. How are you protecting your data? Are your identities all set up? Productivity and collaboration. Do you have teams deployed, right? Things like that. Are you optimizing the ultimate experience for your end users? Because as I mentioned, right now it's very end user focused. It's about productivity gains as a whole. So again, just an idea of a readiness checklist to consider when getting ready for that AI adventure that you're all likely started on already. So let's talk a little bit more about that Windows platform, that Windows, experience. And, Windows oftentimes can be taken for granted is probably the best way to describe this, right? It's the operating system we've all been using, as long as we've been working, right? At this point. And what I want you to all take away is that when you think about, again, that rocket ship of Copilot, how are we attaching it to a platform that is going to allow those end users to be as successful as possible? And that platform isn't just the device, although, Lenovo, obviously a fantastic partner, fantastic devices, and we'll talk about kind of the next generation of devices here in a moment. But how are we looking at the entirety of the Windows ecosystem, whether that be investments we're making with our silicon partners like Qualcomm, AMD, and Intel? What investments is Microsoft specifically making in the operating system, the experience, and the technology we're putting into it? And I'll touch on some of those. And lastly, those OEM partnerships, right? How are we looking at someone like Lenovo to build the device experiences that we need that optimize what we're doing around AI? And so really it's that middle ground between the expectations, the challenges that you're facing as an organization and what you desire from the AI experience, the likely outcomes, right, that I went through those 10 hours back and all those productivity gains. In the middle, that glue, that in-between space is that Windows platform. That is where the technology of AI and the end user experience meet, and really focusing on optimizing that and having the right experience is critically important. And so I want you all to take away from this that Microsoft is taking this middle ground very seriously. I've been at Microsoft now for quite some time, and the amount of investments that we are making as an organization into this platform, into this Windows platform in conjunction with all the new devices and everything is significant, right? Because we recognize the fact that this is an important aspect to a customer's AI journey. So let's talk a little bit about Windows, and I'll be brief on some of these because we don't want to go overly deep. And I'll give you a couple of high level pieces of information if you weren't familiar with what Windows 11 could mean to your organization. And so we have made, again, significant investments here in the OS level, whether that be integrating, Copilot in Windows and integrating that AI experience directly into the operating system as an application experience, improvements in security, talking about hardware and application compatibility. Really, Windows 11 as a whole was built to optimize the experience of working from anywhere. So a lot of you, may still be in hybrid situations, or whether you're working in the office, but you even walk to the coffee shop for a moment, how is that operating system supporting you working from wherever you desire, right? And how are we thinking about how to use AI tools, security tools, all of those things integrated into the operating system to optimize that experience? And that's really where the Windows 11 story kind of starts. So at a high level, talking a bit about some of those trends, security, that by far and away remains the biggest reason why customers have transitioned from Windows 10 to Windows 11, has been because of security. So a 58% drop in security incidents for organizations that have moved from Windows 10 to Windows 11. Now, to be clear, Windows 10, fantastic operating system. It's a very secure operating system, but there are specific needs that I mentioned here about hybrid work in which there are new security features that needed to be deployed, whether that be at the hardware level or all the way up through the operating system end user experience. An example of this is I'm going to use the coffee shop, or actually I'm going to use an office experience for this, is presence sensing as an example. So when I was working in an office, and I've worked from home now for quite some time, but when I used to work in an office, I would get up from my desk and I wouldn't lock my PC, right? And I didn't think anything of it. And usually the worst thing that would happen would be a coworker would come over and see I'd stepped away, and they would invert my monitors, right? It was a fun office practical joke. But now, in the reality of the world we live in today, if I get up from my PC, I could have very sensitive information up on my desktop. Let's say I'm working in a coffee shop or anywhere outside the office, and I've just developed bad habits working from home, and I just walk away briefly. Who knows what access somebody may have. And so presence sensing automatically locks your device, knows that you've moved away from your device, automatically locks it so no one can have access to it. And then using Windows Hello as an example, when I sit back down, it automatically recognizes that I'm back, reads my face, and allows me in. So that is part of this security portfolio, if you will, that's allowing us to see this reduction in security incidents. It's a very literal example. There are obviously more technical, ins and outs at the device level as well. IT management, I'll touch a little bit on this when we get to the migration story, but overall, so far, we're seeing a 99.7% application compatibility from 10 to 11. So for those of you who are still running Windows 10 today and are concerned about applications being able to be moved, overall, we haven't seen any major issues there. I'll touch on some specifics on that in a moment. But overall, we're seeing also the ease of management of Windows 11. Those of you that are used to running Windows 10 in a very similar experience, whether that be you're managing your devices through Intune or SCCM or just through Windows Update for Business, that overall IT management experience with Windows 11 has just been improved drastically. The user experience, even just with Windows as an operating system, not even touching on AI, we see a significant increase in productivity. A lot of that has to do with, honestly, the toning down of the operating system. Less things flashing at you, less things, distracting you, trying to keep it clean and simple. Again, taking some of the pandemic learnings and building it into the operating system. And then obviously the AI story, right? We're building that AI feature set directly into the device. And I'm not going to go into some of the technical details, but just know that we are continuing to invest heavily in things like Windows Copilot runtime and other technology features that are bringing that AI experience not only into the end user interface, but also for IT to take advantage of deploying things like leveraging small language models on the device and things like that. Again, that's a much bigger topic for another time. So let me talk a little bit here about Copilot Plus PCs, because it's something we introduced now. We introduced it back in May. So what are we, 4, 5, 6 months or so, into the Copilot Plus PC story. And so, recognizing there may still be some general confusion in the market about Copilot Plus PCs. So the one thing I will say is, for those of you who are starting your AI journey, or you're starting your experience of what you're looking to do with Copilot for M365, know that any Windows 11 PC that is in the market today is absolutely a fantastic choice for your organization to really kickstart that end user experience that I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so, right? So the Windows 11 PCs that exist today from Lenovo, supported by Intel and AMD, fantastic devices for you all, to consider. Copilot Plus PCs is the next generation of PCs, and we are only in the very early starts of this overall transition. And over the next 2 to 3 years, this category of devices is just going to become more and more prevalent in the market. It is basically, the best way to describe this is an enhanced hardware spec of the device. It has an NPU, which I'll touch on here in a second, that allows for AI workloads to be run more locally on the device. And so there are definitely use cases for Copilot Plus PCs. Absolutely. If you haven't, purchased a few of these to begin testing and seeing the impact it could have on your business, I highly encourage you to, start the process, start thinking about, what this generation of devices could mean to your business, and begin getting in front of that pace. But again, know that, we are absolutely supporting both of these initiatives, both existing, Windows 11 Pro PCs, as well as Copilot Plus PCs in the market. And there are use cases certainly for both of them. So just to get a little bit more specific on those Copilot Plus PCs, right? Again, it's about a hardware spec. And I think this next slide actually does a little bit better job of being more specific, right? It's about performance, right? When you think about AI and you think about the heavy workloads that it could, bring to your organization, you do need a device that could keep up with that. You want to have a device that is able to have longer term battery life, the ability to run those workloads locally without having access, to the cloud or access to the internet, right? And so this is the platform of devices that is going to allow you to do that. It really starts with the NPU, the neural processing unit, right? This is a newish chipset that will, be installed in the PCs. It allows for 40 tops minimum performance, right? That's trillions of operations per second. And so just again, the ability to have access to that technology to run AI workloads locally, not relying on the GPU and the CPU, allows the devices to run faster and quicker, and keep the battery life longer. In addition to that, we've obviously also provided some enhanced security experiences with this category of PCs, as well as operating system experiences that are reliant on this category of PCs. And again, I think we are in the very early stages of this new category, and know that Microsoft and other ISVs are continuing to invest in applications and experiences that will only be able to run and take advantage of this type of category of PC. So that is Copilot Plus PCs in a nutshell. I highly encourage you all to, start taking a look at what this could mean for your organization. So as I kind of look to start wrapping up, I've been kind of skirting around and touching on a few of this, and this is the moment, if you will, to start really talking about moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11. For all of you out there that are still running Windows 10, you need to be aware that that Windows 10 as an operating system will no longer be supported as of October 14th, 2025. So we're at about 13 months from right now for moving off of the Windows 10 operating system and moving into Windows 11. Okay. So what does into support mean? End of support means that Microsoft will no longer be providing security updates and patches. So for those of you who are concerned about security, this is a major milestone you need to be aware of and you need to start planning for. Okay, you have 13 months to complete this. Depending on the complexity of your organization, I will say, there's a possibility you could be behind, depending again on the complexity of your environment. And so it's important for you to be aware of this date and begin planning for this overall transition. So a couple things just to be aware of, right? Why would you want to make that move now? Right now, Windows 10, Windows 11 still relatively similar in terms of operating system. So the end user experience has been pretty seamless. We do have great adoption tools for organizations out there at no cost that you can provide to your end users who are concerned about that change management. I'm happy to share those links. The second is for those of you on the call that are, more focused on the IT and the management of this, it's not a major migration. If those of you who experienced the 7 to 10 move, that was quite a heavy lift. This is not. In fact, Windows 11 is essentially a feature update to Windows 10. So important to be aware of. And all of our third-party, partners out there have now, fully recommended that we make that move. And here's the timeline, right? And in fact, you just, again, need to be aware that we're inching closer and closer to the end of this timeline when it comes to this end of support. And in fact, we're even to the point now where some instances of Windows 11, early versions of Windows 11 are transitioning to end of support as well. So again, be aware that the timeframes kind of exist. For those that need an example of, what a migration plan kind of looks like overall in terms of moving to Windows 11, this is really kind of the map. And so these are all the different stages and phases you should consider. I'm not going to dive into each one, but just know that there is a process in place. You're obviously welcome to have, this slide to begin planning if you haven't done so. But know that there are steps along the way. And my takeaway from this is that, yes, it takes time. You absolutely need to consider the time that it takes for you as an organization to plan for this, test applications, test environments, and things like that to make sure that you're, good to go for that transition. I'm going to touch on just a few of these steps. The first is application testing, which is kind of in this environment application validation phase. So I already mentioned this earlier, 99.7% of all the applications that currently run on Windows 10 have been validated to be have no issue already running on Windows 11. We've evaluated over 800,000 applications. And so it absolutely has not been an issue. However, there are instances, especially if you have been around as an organization for some time, perhaps you've built some homegrown applications and you're concerned about them. We have a program called Aperture, and the link to Aperture is there on the top of this slide. You can engage that team for any application issues you have between Windows 10 and Windows 11, and they will help remediate that application for you. So for any of you out there that are concerned about this move and what it could mean to your organization in terms of, shutting you down or anything like that, don't let it get to that point. Start testing those applications that you're concerned about today and engage that team if you do have any problems or concerns. The next really is about device eligibility. So part of this transition, and it's an important aspect for you guys to all be aware of, is that there is a minimum spec requirement for devices to move from Windows 10 to Windows 11. The primary driver and reason for that has been security, okay? The biggest obstacle to older devices making the move is that it has to have a TPM 2.0 chip in the device. So this is just the overall hardware requirements. Again, you can take a screenshot of this and certainly look internally, but there are specific requirements for devices in order to make the move. And there are processes by which you can check your install base to make sure that the devices you do have can make that transition. These are those opportunities and those options for you, okay? So you can look at business readiness reports in Intune. You can look at the endpoint analytics work from anywhere report also with Intune. You can use the configuration manager and you can run scripts. And again, all of these will be available to you guys after this webinar for you to look into more specifically. But I highly, highly suggest, again, very quickly here, beginning to plan what your Windows 11 migration will look like, and ultimately, what are the steps you need to take as an organization to plan for it, test your applications, identify devices that can't make the move, and then the rest of it from there typically is more in line with any other IT deployment as a whole. So with that, I know I covered a lot of ground. What I kind of want to conclude with, obviously, is a big thank you to you guys for listening, and I hope this was helpful in terms of setting the stage when it comes to how Windows exists in that AI world, where we can help you, what to start thinking about. If you have any questions, or anything that I can help with, obviously, please feel free to reach out to ByteSpeed and through Lenovo. I'm always here to answer any questions. With that, I am going to turn it over to my friend Steve Heyman from Lenovo.
Thanks, Brian. I would assume you still have the charts, or somebody does. So
Yep.
Good. Can everybody hear me, just to make sure?
Yep.
All right, good. So from Lenovo's perspective, we're obviously an OEM and have a lot of the hardware that Brian's talked about. But this whole transition to Windows 11 and Copilot, optimized for Windows 11. When you look at Lenovo, we have a strong position of hardware, software, services support. ByteSpeed is one of our valued partners, working together. So this is a statement really from Lenovo, but it's working with our partners because we don't like to cannibalize the business from them, right? So, or anybody. So, but we have like I said, the hardware, the software, the services, and support. As you can see, competitive pricing. We have our cloud marketplace, which is one of our platforms to order licensing if that's the way that you want to go. Value-added services, which we'll talk about in a minute, and additional support for our clients as well. So if we can move to the next slide. So we offer, and it can be offered, in conjunction with ByteSpeed, a Windows 11 proof of concept. And that proof of concept really is the next step, as Brian was talking about, setting up your journey and your plan on which devices can move, how do you migrate, which have to be refreshed. We offer a proof of concept, which is, a no-cost obligation to, you as the end user, where we will help you with the chart that Brian put up of the different ways to look at and get the data of your devices to be able to assess your fleet, to say which ones are in the status that they have the technical requirements that can move to Windows 11, and if not, which ones cannot and which ones need to be refreshed. That's part of this. We do this assessment. Then we work on the proof of concept up to 50 devices to be able to do the testing and the things that Brian talked about. I don't want to be redundant here, but it's really up to the 50 devices over a course of 6 weeks. We move 5, then we move 20, then we move 25. You learn the process, you see it. And if you need more help after the 50, certainly we're here to help you. If not, you'll have enough learnings to be able to continue to migrate and do this within your organization yourself. So that's what our Windows 11 proof of concept is. And again, in conjunction, you can reach out to ByteSpeed, you can reach out to us. Either way, we're all happy if that's a service and something that you think is going to be valuable to you as you plan this transition to Windows 11. I'm just going to pause for a minute as you move to the next slide and just reiterate what Brian said. I too have been using Copilot for like 6 months now, and the productivity save is very real. And there's many different ways to get to that 10 hours. And so if you haven't considered Copilot, it might be something that you want to look at. The productivity is real. If you happen to be out, my use case that helped me the most is I was out on a short-term disability when I came back, as I'm sure all you can remember or know, that if you're out for 1 week, let alone 6 weeks, your inbox is a mess. With Copilot summarizing the string of events, I went from something that would take me a week to get out from under to less than a day. It really is that productive. So I just share that, personal note there. Some of the other services around this space in Lenovo, we call it digital workplace services. You can see we have one-time professional services that could help you with, migrations. It could help you with security assessments. We have managed services that are backup, security. A lot of in the industry have this. We have MDR and cyber resiliency as a service over in our security. And excuse me, we have other services. We've talked about the Windows 11, the Copilot. There are services similar to a Windows 11 POC. In Copilot, how do you want to assess your environment, the security, the permissions, to make sure that each individual user is getting the most value out of what they're authorized to see within your organization? And then you can see down on the bottom, this thing that says tokens. I wouldn't worry about it. That's just more of an operational thing, but we also offer all of these services, and I'm sure, ByteSpeed does too. And any of us can help you if this is something that you really think that you would need. The point of this slide is to see the broad nature of it. It's not just migrate to Windows 11 and there's not other things for you to worry about. And I'm sure all of you know all this already. So if we could go to the next slide. So as I was talking about Copilot, some of the services that Lenovo offers, again, it could, how you purchase them is not the point here, because they can be sold through resellers or direct from Lenovo. But what's important to understand about the Copilot is our services and the implementation of a Copilot is based on history that we've already done as we've deployed it. And we can make the recommendations and share with you some of the things that we learned through this journey. So you have step one, which is advise, step two, assess, then you have a deployment phase, you have an adoption phase, and certainly in the last is where Brian was talking about, as you talk about how do you leverage Copilot to work with APIs for you to build your own Copilots, if you will, or AI functionality and application on top of it. So that's just a broad range of, it's not, as Brian said, taking Copilot and just throwing it in and saying into your tenant and saying, okay, all my users can use it. If you don't train them the right way, you're not going to get that same adoption level. So example, when I got Copilot in our test phase, we had 2 hours of training and it really made a big difference. And then we've built this part of services to be able to do that for other organizations as well. So next chart. This is about Microsoft licensing, and I know that ByteSpeed does that, so I'm just gonna ask us to go one step further than this chart. But if you have questions on your licensing, you can ask ByteSpeed, you can ask us or Microsoft. But here's just an example of the enterprise plans of for M365. Again, I don't want to get too much into the licensing, and I know these charts were here, so I want to make sure that you see the depth and breadth of the Microsoft stack and how you can leverage all of these technologies. So if we can go to the next slide. Now we're talking about more hardware here, and there's a survey at the end, and you can win a ThinkVision 14-inch portable monitor from Lenovo. Next slide. I think we're running to the end. And again, here's, as Brian talked about, there are device recommendations from Lenovo, but that slide that has the specs for what will run Windows 11, run Copilot, these are some of them. And certainly, talk with your hardware representatives, and they can help make a good recommendation for that. So next. And that is my section. I know it's a lot shorter, but we wanted to make sure you saw the depth and breadth of how our partnership, all three of us, Microsoft, ByteSpeed, and Lenovo, can really help you in your organization. We can cover start to finish along a wide variety of applications and Windows 11 Copilot, and certainly leveraging the technologies like Aperture from Microsoft. So I'm going to turn it back over, I guess, to Anna.
Thank you both so much. That was super informative, and I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything. I saw just a couple little chats, but nothing for questions or anything. So I'll just open it up for questions. And if anybody has anything, feel free to pop them either in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get those answered. But you guys did such a good job that there's not a ton of questions. You covered a lot of ground.
The only challenge was getting through it quickly for you all. Microsoft, we have no shortage of PowerPoint slides and no shortage of information we're happy to share. And now is the right time if you really did have any questions. This content can sometimes just be, it's a lot. We understand that, and we know that it can feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. So even if you're saying, oh, I don't know if I should ask that, don't hesitate, or as a follow-up as well.
A very good question. Did you use Copilot to build your presentation?
Some of it. That's, it's a great question. What I typically have used Copilot for, because we obviously have Copilot for M365, is it does allow me access to search internally. And so when I'm looking for content that's specific or trying to drive a specific narrative, I can ask it to search for decks or content that exists within any aspect of Microsoft to help me pull together. A lot of times what we're finding, even Microsoft, we're a very large organization, we're very siloed. And so you'll see content that's geared toward financial services for M365 and content over here that is Windows Server refresh. And so it doesn't naturally come together. So using Copilot to search for the content you need, absolutely. I have used it in other instances to create PowerPoints, and it's fantastic. Like, it really does save time.
Yeah, I would echo what Brian said. As a different organization, Lenovo not being as large as Microsoft, but certainly we're fairly large. That silo effect, Copilot, as long as you have access to, some of the materials that you need within your organization, and it follows along the same Microsoft M365 access that you have, Copilot really does a very good job. I mean, I asked Copilot in the first week I had it build me a presentation on delivering Copilot. And it worked. And to Brian's point, it does save us a lot of time.
Great question.
Another question here. What is the oldest currently supported Intel processor on Windows 11?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to say 8th gen is kind of that last general version. And so if you're running that, I can get more specific. To be honest, I don't have it top of my head here, but
that's right. It's 8th gen.
It is 8th gen. And Justin, you had that idea when you typed in the question. Thanks, Lucas. I've got another question. We had some Win 7 PCs that have Windows 10 on them. Will they have to be replaced?
I'm going to give you my gut answer, which is yes. If they were running Windows 7, there is a high, those are probably getting close to at least 10 years old, would be my guess here. And so, but if you go on any of those tool sets that I mentioned, the shortest one is even just using the PC Health Checker app for an individual device to take a look. It'll tell you. But if it's running, an older Intel Gen processor, and if it doesn't have TPM 2.0, it won't make the move. Good question.
Then, how would you measure Copilot with AI resources?
Can you ask that again?
How would you measure Copilot with other AI resources? I'm thinking that you may mean compare them.
Oh, okay. So I would say a couple things to this. I would consider Microsoft a leader in terms of business productivity, right? That is our business, whether that be the Windows operating system all the way up through their entire stack. And so when it comes to an organization that can design something for use in business, I've always been confident in the Microsoft capability. We're also kind of first to market when it comes to the AI story. And I'm only talking about end user productivity here, not even getting into the infrastructure and the Azure and the relationship we've built with OpenAI and all those things. So just from an end user experience perspective, I would say broad business use case Copilot is really fantastic. There are absolutely other AI tools that are more, let's call it business specific, right? Niche specific, such as AI built into Adobe. I mentioned that. Those absolutely also great tools. So it's kind of based on what you need. But for that day-to-day every employee kind of experience, Copilot really is the best tool set out there.
All right. We've been disabling Copilot on our new deployments in the hospital. Is this going to be a deterrent going forward as we transition to using 365? We disabled it due to it being something very new to our rural hospital IT team that we were concerned about health service security.
Yeah, great question. I have two answers for this, and Lucas, Steve, feel free. I'm assuming you're referencing the Copilot in Windows experience that comes as part of the Windows 11 operating system. The first thing I would say is having the M365 version of this experience allows you a heck of a lot more control. And again, without getting into all the details, you have to go on the assumption that there are end users in your organization already using certain versions of AI. And that is putting your organization at risk. And so it is better to give them, in my obviously very biased point of view here coming from Microsoft, but I would say it's better to give them access to a tool that you can manage and control from a security and a privacy perspective, especially in the industry that you're in, versus relying on end users' best judgment. In my experience, end user judgment can vary. That's probably the nicer way to say that. And so, having IT management and control, again, that is the foundation of every Microsoft application. It is very, focused on security and privacy first. And so, I would say, thinking through that experience is going to be very important. I'm happy to follow up and get more specific on healthcare use cases and things like that as well. But there's my high level answer. If that helps.
I could add more to that if we have.
Go for it, Lucas.
Yeah, so I'd say most presentation was covering the licensed version of Copilot, which does require you to have a 365 tenant and user setup, and the license is applied to them. The Copilot that comes with Windows and an Edge doesn't need to be licensed. It's a free Copilot, and if you do sign in to personal accounts there, right, you do have risk for your data not being protected or data leakage. So if you're able to control that on the IT side, that's great. You can force people to sign in with their work account, their work credentials, and then you do have data protection from Microsoft enabled at that point. But that Copilot doesn't integrate with your Microsoft apps, so you can't have PowerPoint make a presentation for you. It's just a change.
Yeah, that is the Copilot and Windows experience. It's a super good call out, Lucas. It's that intra ID experience that, having that as part of that mechanism, incredibly important to have that data protection. The other thing I will say too is, just to be really clear, is when you're logged in through your work credentials and you're using Copilot, anything that you put into Copilot does not come to Microsoft, right? There is a giant firewall in place. We do not use information and data that is shared as part of that business experience or organizational experience to train our models. And so again, just kind of building on that privacy statement, that cannot be said when an end user decides to use ChatGPT as an example, right? That is absolutely not protected or protected from model development or anything like that.
I didn't introduce Lucas Holney either. Lucas is our CTO at ByteSpeed, and we've spent a great deal of time looking at different cybersecurity resources. And while the AI conversation is super exciting, we forget the security standpoint that goes around it, and it definitely changes the conversation. One of the partners that we do a great deal of business with does do some training and just cybersecurity awareness, and I would encourage you guys to really think hard about that or reach out to your ByteSpeed territory manager. I hate users. They're your biggest risk. We can't really live without them, even though AI is fantastic. It hasn't replaced the person yet. And just training around understanding security and what we can put into AI and how to use that data and what the parameters are is really, really important. So definitely reach out to us if you have any questions or interested in learning more about what we have for cybersecurity training. And there's also secure browsing. There's a lot of different options to help secure and take advantage of the resources that are out there.
Yeah, this is Steve. One thing I would add is we've had an early interaction with Copilot with one of our clients, and their CTO was on the call. And Microsoft has a bunch of Copilot videos out there on their YouTube channel. And if you find the one on security, we went from a very hesitant CTO about Copilot security in the documents, as Brian was talking about, and you were, Anna. And literally after that 90-second video, his whole tune changed because of the graphics in it that shows you where Copilot sits within the Azure tenant. And he went from, I'm not sure I'm going to do Copilot, to right after the video, let's start with 5 licenses. So there really is a lot of good information out there on Microsoft's Copilot for M365. I know we're talking security, but I wanted to put that out there because it really was very powerful. And I use it now in all my conversations with clients.
Thanks, Steve.
It's an important part of, that AI readiness framework I kind of flashed up very briefly. I think security is the number two. You know, it is very important as an organization to think about all of the impacts of action and inaction, right? So kind of building on Lucas's point from earlier, or the question around healthcare, you know, you have to also consider from a security perspective, what does inaction mean, right? If you assume certain things, if an end user is going to go out there and use a tool set that you're not managing because you haven't provided, you know, an avenue or a route, that's a much bigger security risk than the alternative. And so you have to kind of weigh all these things. It is important. Steve's got a good point. There are lots of information, lots of assets, lots of different vendors. And so, you know, having a really good point of view on security is important.
Absolutely. Well,
Great
if there's
questions.
no more questions, we're getting here to the top of the hour. Thank you again, Steve and Brian, for jumping on. Thank you, Lucas, for contributing here. And we'd love to hear from you guys if there's anything we can do to help with your journey migrating over to Windows 11. And thank you again, guys.